Hi everyone, I'm here today to tell you about our trip in Thanksgiving 1995. It was a beautiful, beautiful weekend. My husband, myself, my cousin, and my mom all gathered into the car to drive up to OK Falls. It was a beautiful Friday night, crisp and clear. The stars were just sparkling in the sky. We arrived close to midnight, got out of the car and packed, and then tucked ourselves in to be ready for the next day. The next morning we got up and, as is our habit in OK Falls, went to the market, which they have every weekend. And it's kind of a swap meet, garage sale, antique sale, everything all at once. And we went and had a look. There were all sorts of knickknacks, antique tools, handmade crafts from people. There was even a stool that looked like an udder or a cow milking stool that had a pink udder underneath it. It was amazing. So we had our look there, and then we stopped at Tickleberry's on the way back. It's our regular ice cream stop, and it's fabulous. They even have their own kettle corn. Amazing. So we had our ice cream, and then we went back to the house. We were sitting around and enjoying the afternoon, and then got ready and had dinner. And over dinner, Lynn said, "You know what? I would really like to go for this hike. It's just up at the top of McIntyre Bluff over there at the end of the lake." And so she said, "It's not that far, and it's only a couple of hours, and it shouldn't be too terribly hard." And all of a sudden, the men piped up and said, "Ooh, not us. There's too many good games on. We are not going hiking." And my mom piped up and said, "Not me. Somebody's got to cook the turkey, and I'm not stepping foot off pavement." So that was good. That left Darcy and I and Lynn, who were looking at going on the hike. So we got settled that night, and then got up the next morning to help my mom do her preparations for Thanksgiving dinner, peeling the potatoes, peeling the carrots, just getting all ready. And once we'd done all that, we decided it was time to go. It was a beautiful morning, lovely fall, crisp, when it's warm in the sunshine, but it's cool in the shade, fabulous. So we got in the car and we drove to Covert Farms. And when we got there, we came out of the car, and it's just a dirt parking lot. But you stop at the little stand there, and they give you a hand-drawn photocopied map that's sort of a guide way to get to the top of the cliff. But there's no marked trails or anything. So we took the map, and we grabbed our supplies, and off we went. So we started hiking, and going through the dry grass. You could hear it crinkle and rustle as we went through it. And we were talking and laughing, and Lynn was pointing out birds as we went, and it was amazing. And we kept going a little bit slower as we started going uphill, but still wonderful. But always keeping our eye on the ground, just in case there was a snake. So as we went, we came up to the top of a little bit of a bluff there. There were some trees around, and we looked, and right in front of us was this huge crevasse. And we knew that we had to get over it, but at the same time, we really wanted to make sure we were safe. So we had a really good look and picked our way down, and then picked a safe way back up to the top of the bluff, and stopped for a moment to catch our breath and have a look. So we were in a bit of a wooded area, but we could see a bit of a meadow beyond. And as we started walking, we hit the meadow area, and there was a bit of a path there. All the paths were basically made by animals, deers, mountain goats, what have you, walking through the areas. So we stayed on the path, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this young girl appeared in front of us, and she had this wild look in her eyes, and she was panting, and she was breathing hard, and she yelled out, "Has anyone seen Mr. McMillan?" And we said, "No." "Who's Mr. McMillan?" I asked, and she said, "He's my gym teacher. He'll know what to do." And I said, "Well, but what's wrong? What's happening?" And she said, "It's my dad. It's my dad. He's down on the path, and my mom's with him. I need to go get help." And she started off again. So my cousin Darcy and our friend Lynn looked at each other and decided to head off in the direction that she had come from. And so off we went. And not 3 minutes later, we came across another group of hikers, 4 of them in total. And we said, "Are any of you Mr. McMillan?" And they said, "No, why?" And we said, "Well, there's a man down along the path there, and he needs some help." And they said, "Well, that's okay," but carried on. And we were totally shocked because we were in the middle of nowhere. There's no cell service. There's no anything. And they just carried on their way. Anyways, we gathered ourselves and went back along the trail. And it wasn't more than 2-3 minutes later that we came across the woman and her husband, and he was definitely down on the trail, and it wasn't good. And I had to look at Lynn and I had to look at Darcy, and I saw the look on their faces. And I thought to myself, could I do the run? And I realized that my knees were not going to be up to it. So I handed them the map, and they went on their way to go down to the farm to get help. When I stopped, I just fell to my knees and looked at the woman and said, what do you want me to do? Whatever you want me to do, I will do it. And she looked up and she said, compressions. So we started 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and she would rescue breathe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and she would rescue breathe. And we carried on like that for some time. And in between, she told me that her name was Sue and that her husband's name was David, and that they had been out for a good hike, but that at some point, David started to not feel well, threw up, and then started walking again, and then sat down and collapsed. So we carried on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, rescue breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, rescue breath. And I said to Sue, I don't care how long you want to go on. I will carry on for as long as you need me to. And we just kept going and going. Eventually she looked at me and she said, can you do the rescue breaths? And I took a really good look at David, and I thought, I don't know how much it's going to do, but I will do them if that will bring you comfort. And so we changed positions, and she started pumping. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I was doing the rescue breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then out of the corner of my eye, as she was doing the compressions, I looked over and I could see a group of people heading towards us. And I yelled out, are any of you Mr. McMillan? And the one fellow said, yes, I am. And I said, can you help? And he came forward and he said, absolutely. And it turned out that it was Mr. McMillan, a friend of his who was a doctor, and 2 nurses that were in the group. So they immediately came over and took over the compressions and the rescue breaths. They knew, I'm sure at first glance, that there wasn't a lot to be done, but they tried, and then the doctor called, and that was it. So Sue and I walked away. She was obviously distraught. We were all exhausted, and sat down, and I tried to comfort her a little bit, but eventually she said, I just need to be alone. And so I walked away from the group that was tending to David's body, and found myself sort of on the edge of the gully looking across. And I could see the RCMP Suburban there, and I knew their car wasn't coming anytime soon, but I know the police officer was on his way on foot. And as I was standing there, there was a bit of a noise to my side, and all of a sudden, a man on a sweaty horse burst forth from a path that was right beside me. And I looked at him, and I looked at the horse, and I said, where did you come from? And he said, I came to help. I was at the farm, and I saw all these people talking about what had happened, and I was coming back from a ride, but I realized that my horse and I would be able to get here faster than anyone. And he looked over, and he had and could see what was happening with David and the doctor and Mr. McMillan and Sue sitting off to the side. And he said, I guess I'm a little bit too late. And I said, that's okay, but thank you so much for trying. It has been a lot, but thank you so much. So he moved away a little bit and started to get off his horse and take his horse so he could just have a nibble of grass. And then the next thing I know, the RCMP officer appeared in the same place, and he was huffing and red in the face, and obviously had not been doing that much hiking, and came up, and he could see what was happening. And so he had a look and looked at me, and I said, they're all over there. And so he went over and talked to the doctor and talked to everybody in that group, and then went over and talked to Sue, and so that he could get a good picture of sort of what had happened leading up to this and what was transpiring now. And then all of a sudden we could hear this incredible noise. Whoo, 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 whoo. And we looked up and looked down the lake, and we could see a helicopter coming towards us. And we could hear the noise. Whoo, whoo, whoo. And as it was coming towards us, it started to circle over top of the bluff. And it circled 2 or 3 times. I think the first time trying to find us, and the second time trying to find a safe place to land. And I will be honest, there weren't a lot of safe places Lots of rocky ground, some scrubby pine trees, but enough to not make a good clearing. I don't know how the helicopter pilot did it, but he did find a space. Very, very tight. Touched down, and the next thing we know, a paramedic jumped out with his case in hand. He started walking quickly towards us, but he could tell from what was happening in the scene in front of him that it was a little beyond the time. So he conferred with the doctors. Sue and I sort of got back together and sat beside each other. So the police officer had a look at what was going on around, and he spoke to Sue and I and said, "We've decided that everyone will stay here, but the two of you will go down in the helicopter to start with, because Sue, you need to talk to your family, and we can get you down there quickly to do that." So she and I got on board the helicopter and off we went. It was my first and only helicopter ride in my life, and we landed very, very quickly at the farm. Off we got. I gave her a little hug, and off she went to where her family was gathered. It turns out the young lady that we had seen was a twin, and her brother had gone to pick up the twin and brought them up to the farm so that Sue had the opportunity to tell them what had happened, and they could start the grieving process together. I was able to reunite with Lynn and my cousin Darcy, and we gave each other hugs and got into the car, and off we went home. The very, very quiet ride, all of us sort of processing our own thoughts. When we got back to Lynn's house and got out of the car, I saw my husband, and I just broke down. I was distraught with all that had happened. After about an hour, I was able to calm myself a bit. And in the meantime, my mom had carried on cooking dinner, and Darcy and Lynn had shared their stories about how they had gotten down to the farm. And then we all sat down for dinner, saying grace and being grateful and thankful for being able to be together, knowing that another family was not.